Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Streaming Charts with Dan. You may have noticed that programming on the channel was a little light last week. Well, that's because I kind of had a big week. That's right. It was wedding week for myself and Mara last week. We got married last Tuesday on Halloween, so I was away in Los Angeles all week. I had a couple of pre-programmed things, but that's why the programming wasn't quite as frequent as you may have been used to here on the channel. It was an incredible day, and I'll talk more about it, I'm sure, as time goes on. But that does give way to this week. This week is actually going to be pretty packed. We got streaming charts today. We've got charts with Dan tomorrow. I'm also going to have reviews for the Marvels. I'm going to have a review for Loki Season 2, and I'm banking a bunch of stuff for the next couple weeks after this week as we are away on our honeymoon and celebrating everything. So we have a bit of a gap week this week, but there is a lot going on. So let's turn to, well, what is to me the second biggest news of what's happened recently, but something that I'm super excited about, of course, which is charts. You know me, I always love charts. We are going to look at all of the streaming charts, Netflix, Nielsen, all of that in just a few minutes, but I wanted to talk first about Disney Plus specifically and their big intellectual properties. One of the big things when Disney Plus was launched was that they were going to lean hard into Star Wars and Marvel IP, which meant that we would be getting a lot of Star Wars shows and a lot of Marvel shows, which we have. And I'm sure that the hope for Disney was that these would explode in popularity and then continue to grow like the Marvel movies have done. And that isn't quite what's happened. There was that initial surge of popularity, but it seems like there's been a bit of a cooling. And now that we finally have the numbers from Nielsen for the latest Star Wars series, Ahsoka, we have numbers for all 8 episodes. We will have numbers in the coming weeks for Loki, but I'm not going to be here, so I wanted to cover this right now. Let's look at the progression of these Disney, Star Wars, and Marvel shows, how the different seasons have performed over time, and what that might tell us about what audiences think about these different properties and really about Disney Plus. So let's look first of all at the numbers for Ahsoka. As I mentioned, we now have ratings numbers for all 8 episodes. Now, it is possible that Ahsoka sticks around in the Nielsen ratings for a week or two after the debut of that 8th and final episodes. That has been the case with some Star Wars series, not all of them. And let's look first of all at total domestic watch time for these Disney Plus Star Wars series, at least the ones where we have full data available. There are some, like The Bad Batch, that we just don't have information for on every episode because, quite frankly, they're not listed on every Nielsen ratings chart. So when we look at total domestic watch time, right now Ahsoka is trailing Andor and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, it is very possible if Ahsoka sticks around for another week or two on the charts that it could pass just barely Andor and Obi-Wan Kenobi. But you see that the Book of Boba Fett has 83 million total watch hours, The Mandalorian Season 1 at 90 million total watch hours, then The Mandalorian Season 3 at 139 million. Now, keep in mind the way that Nielsen tracks series once you get past the first season. The Mandalorian Season 3 really encompasses watch time for anybody watching any season of The Mandalorian. So that's everybody watching new episodes in Season 3 and everyone going back to watch Season 2 and Season 1. But still, the fact that Season 3 ranks that far below The Mandalorian Season 2 at 181 million says that even rewatches were down. So right now, Ahsoka trailing the shows that we have data for, but it looks to be about on par with the total watch time for Andor and for Obi-Wan Kenobi. Of course, Andor had more episodes than Ahsoka. Obi-Wan Kenobi had fewer episodes than Ahsoka. So how do we average all of that out? Well, that's why I also look at hours watched per episode. So we take the full watch time and divide it by the number of episodes, and that gives us a rougher idea of just how many people were watching each series when you try to equalize it by episode. And when you look at it this way, Andor had the lowest hours watched per episode, 5.86 million hours per episode, which is not really that surprising considering the streaming numbers for the show. Ahsoka is there at 8.48 million hours watched per episode, significantly trailing The Mandalorian Season 1, which was at 11.29 million hours watched per episode. Obi-Wan Kenobi was at 11.83, and the Book of Boba Fett was at 11.88. So even though the Book of Boba Fett wasn't really that well regarded, a lot of people watched each individual episode. Then we have The Mandalorian Season 3 at 17.47 million hours watched per episode. That's spread across basically the first 3 seasons of The Mandalorian. And then The Mandalorian Season 2, the easy winner, 22.63 million hours watched per episode, which is basically the total watch time of Season 2 divided by 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. It's still that far ahead. So when you look at popularity, it really does seem to be that The Mandalorian Season 1 was a big pop right at the beginning back in 2019 when Disney Plus launched. The Mandalorian Season 2 appears to have been the peak of popularity for Star Wars on Disney Plus. You had a bit of a crossover effect to the Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then we see those numbers starting to trail a bit with Andor, with Ahsoka, and even with a fall off on The Mandalorian Season 3. But what does all this look like when we look at the numbers for Star Wars and the MCU shows? And again, there are some shows that are missing from this chart. What if Ms. Marvel, for example, had multiple episodes that were missing from the Nielsen ratings? So I don't have a full accounting, but they would be pretty low on this chart. So this is actually kind of a better outlook at some of these numbers than if we had included some of the lower viewed shows, if we'd had all of that data. So let's look at Star Wars and the MCU on Disney Plus. And you know what? Let's throw out the second and third season of The Mandalorian because Nielsen doesn't split these things out by season. Let's look at just the debut seasons of these different shows. Starting with The Mandalorian Season 1, which had 90 million hours of total watch time in its debut season. Then we had WandaVision, which had even more total watch time, 90.7 million. There was a bit of a dip in watch time with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. There were also fewer episodes at 78.63. Then we have the most watched show as far as total watch time on this chart, which is Season 1 of Loki at 96.67 million hours. Hawkeye brought in 66.6 million hours of total watch time, followed by the Book of Boba Fett. Again, that was a very much watched show at 83.13 million hours watched. Moon Knight's at 66.32, followed by Obi-Wan Kenobi at just over 70 million hours watched. She-Hulk is at 52 million total hours, keeping in mind that the episodes were a bit shorter for She-Hulk. Andor is at 70.3 million hours watched, mainly because it had the most episodes, I think, of any show on this chart. Then we had Secret Invasion, which was a really, really low number, 42 million hours watched. And then Ahsoka, which is coming in at 67.8 million hours watched. And I added a little trend line there, and you can see that it is definitely trending down from 90 million at the beginning to just under 60 million hours as far as watch time across this time, which means about a third of the viewership has drifted over the last couple years for Marvel and Star Wars. Now, some of that is bound to happen because people lose interest over time, but still, to lose a third of your audience, I'm not quite sure that's what Disney Plus is looking for, especially as you're trying to grow your streaming business over time. And let's look at these same shows as far as hours watched per episode. Again, this sort of equalizes the data out for the number of available episodes, and you'll see The Mandalorian Season 1 there at about 11.29 million hours watched per episode. WandaVision at about 10 million hours watched. Then Falcon and the Winter Soldier, about 13 million hours watched per episode. Then we have Loki Season 1, again, really tops as far as these shows go. 16 million hours watched per episode for Season 1 of Loki. Hawkeye dropped down to about 11 million, and that is a number that we actually saw in this rough era of shows on Disney Plus. Hawkeye with around 11 million hours watched per episode, Book of Boba Fett in the 11 million hour range, Moon Knight in the 11 million hour range, Obi-Wan Kenobi in the 11 million hour range. So again, it seems like a bit of a spike of enthusiasm when you start and then a plateau, but then the numbers have started to dip. She-Hulk brought in 5.8 million hours watched per episode. Again, you can put some of that on the shorter episode time, but still, that is a pretty big drop. Andor was at 5.86 million hours watched per episode. Some of its early episodes were shorter, but those last episodes were longer. We saw about 7 million hours watched per episode for Secret Invasion, so less than half of what Loki was getting. And then for Ahsoka, about 8.48 million hours watched per episode, which is significantly below what we saw for The Mandalorian, for Obi-Wan Kenobi, for Book of Boba Fett. So really, I think this underscores again what we are seeing, which is that you will always have some variability based on episode length, but over time, I think we've seen a bit of a more drastic cooling off for audiences as far as the Marvel shows on Disney Plus, but I think that we also saw first a plateau and now what appears to be a dip as far as the Star Wars shows on Disney Plus, at least as regards Ahsoka. Now, could it be that something that hews a bit closer to the original trilogy might pop that watch time up again? That could very well be so, but keep in mind also that Star Wars is investing reportedly in Dave Filoni and going forward with the Ahsoka stories tying into the animated shows. But I think that the thing to take away here, and the question that I ask at the top of this video and in the title of this video is it time for Disney Plus to worry? Should they be panicked about this? I don't think that they should be panicked right now, at least not for both of these properties. but I do think that it merits some serious concern. First of all, more so for Marvel, and this goes to the movies as well. We've got the Marvels coming up, being released this week. It does not look like the box office forecasting is very positive for this film. We'll see how the reviews look, if it can maybe pull out of that spiral, or what appears to be a spiral right now. Loki Season 2 has been critically acclaimed. The first numbers that officially came out from Nielsen showed a larger drop-off, again about a third, reportedly, from the first episode of Season 1 to the first episode of Season 2, which is what we've been seeing in our data as well. So that's something I think Marvel needs to focus on, a more pronounced dip in viewership for them. For Star Wars, it looks much more like a cooling off of viewership, but if this is the way they're going to go, I think you also have to look at how are we going to re-engage people. For many people, the most acclaimed Star Wars series, perhaps other than The Mandalorian, was Andor, but that's the one that had the least watch time as far as hours watched per episode, and among the least for all Star Wars series, even though it had more episodes than any of the other series. So the acclaim that it's gotten from many fans and critics isn't necessarily translating to popularity. Will Season 2 build off of the popularity and the acclaim of Season 1? We'll see what happens. But this is something that Disney Plus has to take a very hard look at right now. What is the strategy? And that's what they need right now. It is a strategy. We are past phase 1 of this streaming where you just whip everything you can at the wall because people want content, people want shows, people want whatever. Now people want good stuff. They want to see where you're going. People are becoming more discerning. They're canceling a lot of streaming services. And the strategy, I think, is going to be key going forward. The numbers support a cooling off of audience enthusiasm. The hard part is reigniting that enthusiasm. And that's what's next for Disney, for Kathleen Kennedy, for Kevin Feige, for Marvel, and for Star Wars going forward. So that was my look at Marvel and Star Wars on Disney Plus. Let's get to the actual streaming charts, and we will start, as we usually do, with the iTunes chart. As of yesterday, Sunday, November 5th, this was the top 10 on the iTunes chart. At number 1 is Paw Patrol: The Mighty Movie, available for purchase and premium video on demand. Barbie is in second place, currently only available for purchase, as is Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. You cannot rent or even premium video on demand rental those movies right now. They are only for purchase, so that's pretty impressive that they're that high. Gran Turismo is in fourth place, available for purchase and rental. Sound of Freedom, also available only for purchase, is at number 5. A Haunting in Venice, available for purchase, is at number 6. The Equalizer 3, available for purchase and premium video on demand, at number 7. The Liam Neeson film Retribution, which came out earlier this year, available for purchase and rental at number 8. Talk to Me is available for purchase and rental at number 9. And The Kill Room, which had a rather unimpressive and small-ish theatrical release just a few weeks ago, is at number 10, available for purchase and premium video on demand. The thing that I think is most interesting about the evolution of the iTunes chart over the last few years, since we have taken a harder turn towards streaming and home viewing, is that the charts are more and more about purchasing movies when they used to be mainly about renting movies. It looks like this is an ownership economy when it comes to a lot of these films rather than a rental economy, maybe because people are going out to the theater to see things less, or maybe because people are becoming more accustomed to watching things at home or buying them digitally rather than buying them on physical media. But this has been something very interesting to watch, is how things have changed over on these iTunes charts. Usually I would have the Amazon Prime Video top 10 here, but they actually did not have that information available on their site yesterday when I was trying to collect that data, so we're going to have to skip it for this week. And let's look at the Netflix numbers. This is the streaming service that provides the most numbers as far as worldwide viewership, and we have a few weeks of numbers to catch up on. So let's go first of all to the numbers for October 2nd through October 8th. That saw the ascendance of Nowhere, which has been a very successful Netflix original film, to number 1. 54.4 million hours watched and a viewership of almost 30 million just for that week. It looks like a really interesting film. I probably would have watched it had this last month not been an absolute madhouse. Another really successful Netflix original movie, Reptile, in second place with 19.9 million views for the week. In third place is Fair Play, which has never really taken off to the degree of these other two. We'll see if if it's able to kind of stick around for the awards conversation. It had about 12.63 million views in its debut week on the charts. Then we had the Netflix original series Beckham at 12.38 million views in its first week. Lupin Part 3, which is a very successful Netflix series worldwide, is in 5th place at 11.58 million views. Then we have Forgotten Love in 6th place. The debut of Ballerina, an action film from South Korea, in 7th place at just over 10 million views for the week. Then Love is in the Air at number 8, Sex Education Season 4 at number 9, and at number 10, Life of a King, which is a 2013 film about an inner-city chess club starring Cuba Gooding Jr. Life of a King made $44,000 at the box office when it came out a decade ago, so it's likely that the 6.3 million views that the movie got this first full week of October on Netflix is likely the widest audience this movie's ever reached, and another example of just how you never know what movies are going to bubble up on streaming. It's crazy. We had Suits earlier this year as far as series. Now this random 2013 Cuba Gooding Jr. movie. Streaming really is the gift that keeps on giving, and you never quite know what's going to be in that box when you unwrap it. Moving on to the week of October 9th through the 15th, Ballerina moved its way up to number 1 at 14.75 million views. Reptile stayed there in 2nd place at 14.25 million views. Lupin Part 3 was at 14.12 million views in 3rd place, followed by Fair Play with another 14 million views in 4th place, and Nowhere in 5th place at 13.16 million views. So that's actually a pretty healthy competition for the most watched program of the week on October 9th through the 15th. Beckham is in 6th place at 11.56 million views. Then in 7th place, the debut of The Conference, a Swedish film about a business conference that goes horribly awry, at 7.62 million views. Forgotten Love is in 8th place at 6.7 million views, followed by the debut of Mike Flanagan's The Fall of the House of Usher at 6.27 million views. And then in 10th place, the Ang Lee Will Smith box office misfire Gemini Man at 5.28 million views. Again, why Gemini Man? Who knows, but there it is. Moving on to the week of October 16th through the 22nd, at number 1 was the Bill Burr headliner film Old Dads with 13.33 million views. The Devil on Trial is in 2nd place at just over 8 million views. It's a UK documentary about the only known case where demonic possession was used as a defense in court. This was also the source material for the 3rd Conjuring film. The Fall of the House of Usher moves up to 3rd place at 7.89 million views. Lupin Part 3 stays in the top 5 with 7.74 million views. Gemini Man moves up to the top 5 at 7.33 million views, followed by Reptile in 6th place, Beckham in 7th place, The Conference in 8th place, Pact of Silence in 9th place, a Mexican telenovela about an influencer searching for her birth mother, and then in 10th place is Bodies, a crime series from the UK based on a graphic novel about a murder investigation that spans multiple time periods. It debuted to 5.5 million views on that chart. And then moving to the most recent Netflix chart that we have for the week of October 23rd through the 29th, Old Dads maintains the number 1 spot at 16.27 million views. Burning Betrayal debuts in 2nd place at 14.73 million views. It's a Brazilian film about a woman looking for a new start after being cheated on. Pain Hustlers debuts in 3rd place at just over 14 million views. This movie's from David Yates. It stars Chris Evans and Emily Blunt as pharmaceutical salespeople. Given the prestige, I think you might have expected a bigger debut, but we'll see how Pain Hustlers does going forward. In 4th place is the summer movie No Hard Feelings starring Jennifer Lawrence. Remember, Sony has a deal with Netflix. They don't have a streaming service, so their theatrical films go to Netflix first. Just over 13 million views for No Hard Feelings in 4th place. Bodies moves up to 5th place at 7.68 million views. Season 1 of Get Gotti is in 6th place, a docuseries about the pursuit of John Gotti. I'd actually prefer a docuseries about the movie Gotti, maybe because, who knows, I could be in that one. In 7th place is Cold Pursuit, a 2019 movie starring Liam Neeson as a vengeful snowplow driver. This movie is actually wacky enough for me to recommend if you have a couple of free hours. 6.71 million views for that film. Sister Death is in 8th place, a horror film from Spain. In 9th place is Life on Our Planet Season 1 at 5.52 million views. It's a nature docuseries executive produced by Steven Spielberg and narrated by Morgan Freeman. And then in 10th place is Elite Season 7 at 5.28 million views, the 7th season of the hit drama series from Spain. Its next season will reportedly be its last. Looking at the most watched programs to date for Netflix in 2023, just one small change. The top 5 remains the same: The Mother, followed by Extraction 2, Murder Mystery 2, The Night Agent, and Heart of Stone. Then Luther the Fallen Son in 6th place, Queen Charlotte in 7th place, and You People in 8th place. But nowhere actually cracks the top 10 for all Netflix programs year to date when we're talking about total views at 74.45 million. That drops your place or mine down to 10th place, and the Netflix original movie The Outlaws out of the top 10 altogether. And also a small change when we look at the most viewed Netflix series since they started releasing data back in June of 2021. I track the reappearance of shows on these charts when they come back, usually after a new season's aired, and Lupin Part 1 actually hit the Netflix charts again, which moves it up to, by my calculations, the 6th most watched Netflix series since 2021. It moves it above The Queen's Gambit and Money Heist Part 4. Money Heist Part 5 and The Night Agent round out the top 10, and then the top 5 remain the same: Squid Game Season 1, Wednesday Season 1, Stranger Things 4, Dahmer, Monster, and Bridgerton Season 1. We have so many more things to go over, but before we do, I want to thank the sponsors for this week's episode. This episode is brought to you by Mint Mobile. Right now, a lot of people are watching their budgets, except for, it seems, huge wireless providers. From stadium names to thousands of retail stores, big wireless spends so big because they want you to think that they're your only option. Mint Mobile has a different idea. Instead of retail stores, Mint Mobile is online only, which translates to a whole lot of savings because wireless plans from Mint Mobile start at just $15 a month. My guess is that if you subtract $15 from your current wireless bill, that's still a bunch of money. And all of that is money that you could be saving every month with Mint Mobile. All plans come with unlimited talk and text, plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network, and you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone number along with your existing contacts. So while you may not be able to walk into a Mint Mobile store or get tickets to a show at Mint Mobile Arena, you will save money to spend however you want by switching to Mint Mobile. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/Merle. That's mintmobile.com/Merle. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/Merle. This episode's brought to you by Factor. It is the beginning of the holiday season, which means that your days are getting busier with shopping, planning, travel, and finishing up work for 2023. With all of that going on, it's time to take finding the time to prepare nutritious meals off the table with Factor. Factor is America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service, and they can help you fuel up fast for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered right to your door. Their fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat and enjoy. Every week, you can choose from over 35 meal options to meet your dietary needs and preferences, and Factor even has lunch-to-go options with meals like grain bowls and salad toppers that don't even require a microwave. Factor also offers calorie-smart meals at 550 calories or less, protein plus meals with 30 grams of protein or more, and even add-ons like breakfast foods, cold-pressed juices, shakes, and smoothies. This month, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed food delivered to your door, ready in just 2 minutes, no prep, no mess. Head to factormeals.com/Merle50 and use code Merle50 to get 50% off. That's code Merle50 at factormeals.com/Merle50 to get 50% off. Let's move on now to the Nielsen charts. Now, the Nielsen charts are a little bit different from the Netflix charts. It tracks U.S. viewing only. So these are not worldwide numbers. These are only U.S. numbers. There's also a delay of about a month in getting the numbers, which means we're going back almost 2 months to catch up on all of this data. And it's also why I don't do full analysis on some shows like Ahsoka and others until we get that final Nielsen data. It takes a while for them to process and release it. So let's start catching up, and we'll start first with the most watched streaming movies in the U.S. for the week of September 11th through the 17th. That saw the debut of Elemental on Disney+, which debuted to 28.7 million hours watched. This is yet another chapter in the story of Elemental. It had a disastrous box office opening weekend. It was able to stick around to put up a respectable domestic total given how it opened. It did even better when you look at the international numbers, and now it's put up a really impressive debut on Disney+. When we look at the biggest streaming movie debuts of 2023, Elemental actually comes in 4th place behind Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, Avatar: The Way of Water, We Have a Ghost, and then we have Elemental. It tops the debuts of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, You People, The Mother, The Little Mermaid, Minions: The Rise of Gru, Murder Mystery 2. So now Elemental has gone to a streaming hit, at least in week 1. Now the real key, I think, to the movie's success and really perhaps legacy will be how long it sticks around Disney+. Is it going to be one of those things that pops for a few weeks, or is it going to be a movie like Turning Red, for example? I know that that's not exactly the right comparison because of the difference in exhibition strategy, but a movie that you keep seeing pop up week after week over and over and over again. That's what I'm going to be watching for with Elemental. Is it just a quick pop, or are people really connecting to it on streaming as it appeared they were doing in the latter weeks of its theatrical run? In second place was 2023's The Little Mermaid at 9.8 million hours watched, so Disney Plus has the top 2 spots for this week on the most watched streaming movies in the US. Fast X's debut on Peacock comes in 3rd place at 4.5 million hours watched, followed by Woody Woodpecker on Netflix. Love at First Sight debuts in 5th place on Netflix at 3.88 million hours watched, followed by the perennial favorite Moana on Disney Plus. I think that's the kind of thing that Elemental would like to do to replicate the success that Moana has had. Amazon's A Million Miles Away debuts in 7th place at 3.6 million hours watched, followed by the Super Mario Bros. Movie on Peacock, the debut of the documentary Kelsey on Amazon at 2.98 million hours watched, and then The Wolf of Wall Street on a couple of different streaming services, rounding out the top 10 at 2.66 million hours watched. Looking at the most watched streaming shows for the week of September 11th through the 17th, 2023, Virgin River leads the way. It actually displaced Suits, which was at the #1 spot for a number of weeks. 34.2 million hours for Virgin River versus 31.6 million hours for Suits. Bluey's in 3rd place, Grey's Anatomy's in 4th place, SWAT is in 5th place. Dear Child debuts at number 6. It's a series from Germany about a woman who escapes long-term captivity. It debuted on the overall top 10 this week after hitting streaming the previous week. CoComelon is in 7th place, One Piece on Netflix in 8th place, NCIS in 9th place, and Ahsoka returns to the overall streaming top 10 in 10th with 9.61 million hours watched. And looking at the most watched per available episode, Dear Child led the way, 2 million hours watched for each of its 6 available episodes, with Ahsoka right behind at 1.92 million hours watched per episode. Then we had One Piece at 1.38 million hours watched per episode. Those are the ones that were sort of the 1 million plus watch club on that chart. Looking now at the most watched streaming movies for September 18th through the 24th, Elemental remains on top with another strong number, 22.2 million hours watched, followed by The Little Mermaid at 6.55 million hours watched. Guy Ritchie's The Covenant debuts on the chart on Amazon at 5.25 million hours watched, followed by The Wolf of Wall Street and Love at First Sight. Spy Kids Armageddon on Netflix debuts outside of the top 5 with 3.93 million hours watched, followed by A Million Miles Away on Amazon. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem on Paramount Plus debuts on the top 10 at 3.6 million hours watched, followed by Moana on Disney Plus, and the Bert Kreischer film The Machine on Netflix at 3.43 million hours watched for the week. Looking at the most watched streaming shows for September 18th to the 24th, Suits regains the top spot at 29.8 million hours watched. Virgin River drops down to 2nd place, followed by Bluey, Grey's Anatomy, and SWAT. NCIS takes 6th place. The last season of Sex Education debuts on the charts at 10.56 million hours watched, followed closely by Gilmore Girls at 10.51 million hours, then CoComelon at number 9, and Ahsoka remaining at number 10 at 9.5 million total hours watched. Looking at the hours watched per episode, Ahsoka leads the way, 1.58 million hours watched per each of its 6 episodes available at that time. The second season of Murdaugh Murders debuts in 2nd place, 1.56 million hours watched for each of its 6 episodes. That encompasses season 1 and season 2. Then we have Dear Child at 1.2 million hours watched watch per episode, and One Piece following very closely behind just outside of that million watch club at 997,000 hours watched per episode. Then we have a couple of HBO limited series that were debuting on Netflix, Band of Brothers at 931,000 hours watched, and The Pacific at 818,000 hours watched. And I should also note that The Wheel of Time on Amazon is also consistently on this chart. Season 2 brought in 632,000 hours watched per episode for each of its 14 available episodes the week of September 18th. Moving now to the week of September 25th through October 1st, Elemental stays the most watched streaming movie in the United States, followed by Reptile on Netflix at 12.3 million hours watched, Nowhere on Netflix at 8.48 million hours watched, and Meg 2: The Trench, which debuted on Max at 5.63 million hours watched. Then we have The Machine in 5th place, Guy Ritchie's The Covenant in 6th place, Spy Kids Armageddon in 7th place, Moana in 8th place, and then two films from Netflix debuting in 9th and 10th place, Forgotten Love and Love is in the Air. Looking at the most watched streaming shows for September 25th through October 1st, Suits remains in the number 1 spot, Grey's Anatomy moves up to number 2, Love is Blind returns to the chart at number 3 at 15.7 million hours watched for the week, followed by Bluey at number 4, Sex Education at number 5, Virgin River in 6th place, NCIS in 7th place, Cocomelon in 8th, SWAT in 9th, and Gilmore Girls in 10th. Looking at the hours watched per episode, Gen V actually takes the top spot. This was the week that it debuted on Amazon Prime Video with 3 episodes. It generated 2.08 million hours watched per episode. It's a smaller episode count. That's why I do the hours watched per episode, because the total number of hours watched can't compete many times with these shows that have multiple seasons or even more episodes. So when you break it down by hours watched per episode, it allows you to really see the success of a show like Gen V until it can get that episode count up and really generate more watch time to potentially hit that overall top 10. The Netflix docuseries Encounters about alien encounters is in 2nd place at 1.72 million hours watched per episode. Ahsoka's in 3rd place at 1.36 million hours watched per episode. Then we have Murdaugh Murders, which slipped to 4th, and The Pacific in 5th place. And finally, looking at the most recent set of Nielsen data, we have first the most watched streaming movies in the US, which is led by Haunted Mansion on Disney+, 16.5 million hours watched. Not among the top 10 debuts for movies this year, but still an impressive number. Reptile is in 2nd place at 13.96 million hours watched, followed by Elemental, which slips down to 3rd place at about 10.35 million hours watched. Netflix's Nowhere is in 4th place. Las Vegas and Casper are 2 films that debut on Netflix in 5th and 6th place. 2021's Dune also moved over to Netflix at 4.53 million hours watched, and you keep seeing this. This is something that we talk about here on the show. Max is selectively licensing things out to Netflix, and that's why you see things like Dune and miniseries like The Pacific and Band of Brothers and Ballers, which we saw earlier this summer. That's why they're popping up on Netflix and on these watch charts, because Max is trying to generate that money by licensing things out and not making them exclusive to their streaming service, which is a 180 and really almost a 360 back to where we began with all of this. Meg 2: The Trench is in 8th place. The Nightmare Before Christmas debuts in 9th place as the Nielsen data moves into the Halloween season. And Netflix's Fair Play rounds out the top 10 at 3.91 million hours watched overall. Looking at the most watched shows for October 2nd through the 8th, Suits again staying number 1, followed by Grey's Anatomy, Love is Blind, Bluey, and NCIS. Gilmore Girls takes the 6th spot, followed by Cocomelon. Ahsoka is at number 8 with 9.58 million hours watched, followed by Only Murders in the Building as it wrapped up its 3rd season in 9th place at 9.38 million hours watched, and Netflix's Beckham debuts in the top 10 at 8.65 million hours watched. And when we look at watch time per episode, Beckham is number 1, 2.16 million hours watched for each of its 4 available episodes. Gen V is in 2nd place at 1.58 million watched per episode. That's through 4 released episodes. Ahsoka rounds out its season with the release of its 8th episode and a watch time of 1.2 million hours per episode. We had the debut of Loki also this first week of October. At 7 episodes, it has a watch time of 1.06 million hours watched per episode, although likely almost all of that was for that first episode of season 2. Lupin is in 5th place at 454,000 hours watched per episode. Then we have Cocomelon in 6th. The Wheel of Time in 7th place as it rounds out its season, 447,000 hours watched per episode. Only Murders in the Building in 8th place as it ends its season at 312 12,000 hours watched per episode. Then we have Sex Education and Love is Blind. Some changes when we look at the most watched streaming movies of 2023. I mentioned that Elemental has done well so far, and it's actually on the cusp of unseating Avatar: The Way of Water as the second most watched streaming movie in the US this year, at least as far as Nielsen is able to track. Moana has an easy hold on number 1. Avatar: The Way of Water is currently at number 2. Close behind it is Elemental at 75.7 million hours watched. That bumps Black Panther: Wakanda Forever down to number 4, You People down to number 5, Encanto down to number 6, A Man Called Otto down to number 7, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 down to number 8, The Mother down to number 9, Minions: The Rise of Gru down to number 10, and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish off the chart entirely. There's also a minor change with the most watched library streaming series of 2023. So these are acquired shows that did not debut on these various streaming services. Suits remains the overall number 1 at 721 million hours watched this year, followed by NCIS, Grey's Anatomy, The Big Bang Theory, and SWAT. Gilmore Girls moves up to number 6, which bumps The Walking Dead down to number 7. Heartland, Supernatural, and South Park round out the top 10. And when we look at the most watched original streaming series for 2023, no change on the chart this week. Bluey remains number 1, and overall it's the second most watched streaming series of the year, followed by CoComelon, Ted Lasso, Ginny and Georgia, and The Night Agent. Netflix's You is at number 6, followed by The Lincoln Lawyer at 7, The Last of Us at 8, Outer Banks at number 9, and Disney Plus's The Mandalorian at number 10. Looking at the most watched library streaming series since Nielsen started sharing data back in 2020, NCIS and Grey's Anatomy remain numbers 1 and 2, with Criminal Minds at number 3, but Suits moves up to number 4. The next barrier for the show would be that 1 billion hours watched mark. We'll see if it gets there. Supernatural gets bumped down to number 5, and then Heartland, The Big Bang Theory, Gilmore Girls, The Office, and Schitt's Creek remain numbers 6 through 10. And finally, looking at the most watched original streaming series from 2020 to now, CoComelon remains number 1, followed by Bluey, then Ozark, Stranger Things, and Manifest. Virgin River, by virtue of the premiere of its new season, moves up to number 6. That bumps Cobra Kai down to number 7, The Crown down to number 8, Wednesday to number 9, and Bridgerton to number 10. And that does it for this edition of Streaming Charts with Dan. As I mentioned, I will be away for a while, and then I usually let these numbers accumulate for 2 or 3 weeks, sometimes a little bit longer. So I'll be back probably in about a month with an update on all of this. We'll know how the numbers are looking for Loki Season 2 by that time, and we'll see if there's any big changes as far as announcements, shows canceled, shows that are moving. Of course, we have the ramifications from the writer's strike and the actor's strike that we're still seeing in the streaming world. Thank you so much to everybody who watched this show. Be sure to stay tuned right here this week for Charts with Dan tomorrow, and as I mentioned, reviews of Loki Season 2 and The Marvels, and some really fun stuff that I've got planned for the next 2 weeks or so. Also, be sure to check out the description below for more about our wonderful sponsors for this show. They are a big reason of why I'm able to keep doing what I'm doing here on the channel. Thanks for spending part of your day here with me. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.